Kia ora, and welcome to another week of Paranormal Pals Podcast. Now, this week we have a new co-host. We have Susie with us from the Quantum Foundation. Welcome, Susie.
Hey, Trace, good to be here.
Now, Susie's going to be joining us each week and while we talk about different subjects and we chat to different people and we look at different case files. And tonight we're going to do haunting classifications. So these are different types of things, let's just say things, that can be, hauntings can be attributed to, if you like. So when we're talking about this, collating hauntings and putting them into some form of classification is a really daunting task, particularly as we're not even sure what a ghost is. So typically ghosts are defined as being once a living, breathing organism at a cellular level. So whether this be a human or whether this be an animal, and that's the definition that we're going to adopt while we're talking about ghosts tonight. However, when we look at various case file studies, it's clear that experienced paranormal researchers have determined that hauntings can be ascribed to a multitude of beings and not necessarily just ghosts. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to give you a really basic overview, if you like, or of some of the classifications. So when you're dealing with a haunting, I guess that's your first port of call, whether that be a haunted location or a haunted individual, is trying to ascertain what the haunting could be attributed to, i.e. what its classification is. So while the paranormal field is absolutely chock-a-block with theories, theory usually comes from reliable observations and it allows for predictions to take place. Predictions are then tested against data that's been gathered, and the data either gives support to the theory or goes against the theory. So when paranormal researchers are working out in the field, that's effectively what they should be doing, not running around chasing ghosts. So in effect, what we're doing is we're testing theories, and this is the reason why so much data gets collected. So we're going to go through a few different theories tonight, and the classifications we're talking about are going to be based on theories and the data that has been collected by paranormal researchers and parapsychologists from around the globe. So I'm going to start off, and we're each going to take a few different aspects. I'm going to start off with residual hauntings. So when we're talking about a residual haunting, and we may have covered or touched upon some of these subjects in previous podcasts, but we're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit more on them tonight. So when we're talking about residual hauntings, they are considered to be a reoccurring visual, auditory, or aromatic manifestation of a deceased human being or animal. This theory by paranormal researchers and parapsychologists, whether you agree with it or not, is referred to as the stone tape theory. And this theory suggests that limestone, quartz, or magnetite deposits and some other materials can store information such as historical, tragic, or really highly emotional events. So a residual haunting occurs when the information is released and they attempt to validate the theory by using the first law of thermodynamics, which is basically that energy cannot be destroyed nor created and just mutates from one form to another. Today, that theory is slowly fading out of favor with the modern paranormal researcher. However, the theory that quartz, limestone, or magnetite deposits can give energy towards manifestations still actually remains. And again, observations of field work that's been undertaken can quite often discover that a haunted location has an abundance of these present within the earth or the surrounding geographical location of the haunting. So that's something to look for when you're actually out there investigating as well. Parapsychologists have adopted a similar theory, but they refer to it as place memory. So it's the belief that information can be stored by the environment around us, and that the living and the emotions and geomagnetic fields and geological features and weather can influence both the storing and the retrieval of such memories. There's no information or theories currently as to how the environment stores these memories, however, but I guess that's part two, right? So, residual manifestations when they're seen, and jump in anytime, Suze, normally don't interact or acknowledge the living person. They're not aware of anyone around them, and nor do they speak to anyone. They are normally witnessed performing the same ritual in the same way. So it's believed that great emotion or trauma enables the event to be imprinted on the atmosphere or the environment. Auditory phenomena is not always experienced, so they can be seen walking in boots on wooden floors, although you won't hear any sound, or they could be seen smashing a jug, only for the witness to receive absolutely no auditory acknowledgement of that act. So some witnesses to residual hauntings have often reported a deafening, resounding silence while it's been going on. So these hauntings have also been reported as having like a white or a silver sheen or hue to them. So something's quite a little bit off with the color. Some have also been reported as being really solid, but on closer inspection or longer inspection, they appear translucent or start to become transparent. So the absence of the acknowledgement or of the interaction with the living makes this particular type of haunting really easy to ascertain. So it's not actually a spirit, Suze, that we're talking about.
No, yeah. It's just something that remains.
Absolutely. And why it remains or how it remains, again, So residual hauntings can be visual, they can be aromatic, i.e., you can smell them, they can be auditory, or they can be a mixture of two of those things, or they can be all three of those things. So at times you'll only get a visual manifestation, and at other times you might only get an auditory or an aromatic manifestation. And either way, whichever way you look at it, trying to interact with these types of manifestations have proven to be absolutely fruitless. There's no back and forward. They don't even know you're there. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. So an 18-year-old apprentice heating engineer was witness to a residual haunting in the basement of Treasury House in York in England. He saw, a Roman soldier with a helmet emerged from a wall, and that Roman soldier was followed by a cart and horse and a further 20 soldiers. They were walking along, but they were only visible from the knees up. So after research was conducted and some digging was done, it transpired that there was an old Roman road that went into the garrison that ran through where Treasury House had been later on built. But the road was 15 inches lower than the cellar floor. So this is why he could only see them from the knees up. They were literally walking on their road in their era. Another example is in Sharpsburg in Maryland in the USA, at the site of one of the bloodiest battles between the Union and Confederate soldiers. over 5,000 bodies fell in a sunken road that separated two farms. It's now actually referred to as Bloody Lane. And people have witnessed the sounds of gunshots. They've smelt the gunpowder, even though there is no one as far as the eye can see. And then again, others have witnessed soldiers fighting to their deaths. So that's where the auditory and the aromatic come into it. People have heard sounds and they've smelt things, but they haven't seen anything. And then other people have seen things, but they haven't smelled or heard anything. So, as I said, you can get a mixture of 1, 2, or 3 of all of those things. So that's pretty much residual hauntings in a nutshell. So, Suze, do you want to talk about intelligent or interactive hauntings?
Yeah, sure. Intelligent, or also known as interactive hauntings, are, I suppose, both the easiest and the hardest to sort of ascertain, because it's not always apparent until after the event that you've been interacting with something. Those that experience intelligent hauntings have reported speaking to ghosts and receiving answers, having seen or entered into full-blown conversations, unaware they're even talking to, a ghost. Manifestations can represent themselves in all sorts of different ways. The most documented way is appearing like a solid human being. So, people think they've seen an actual person walking past them, and it's not. Some are indistinguishable. However, they do tend to seem out of place. So, whether that's their demeanor, whether that's their dress, and there is a danger for the likes of us in the paranormal research field of confusing them with crisis apparitions, which is, again, completely different subject entirely. Because they tend to show themselves to loved ones as opposed to just the general public, person. We know intelligent hauntings converse with the living, and it could be manifesting visually, audibly, various different ways. They're thought to converse predominantly via responses to questions that are posed to them.
So like in EVP sessions, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. An EVP session. So, they may not initially come out and speak or say something, but, when you pose questions to them and you're recording it, you might not hear it directly either until you go back and review those EVPs and those recordings, and suddenly there's that voice. And no physical manifestation is usually present during those. So it's quite interesting. They will attempt to interact with the living, engaging in unusual phenomena, opening and closing doors, windows, banging on walls, turning on taps, light switches, moving objects around, and just making their general presence felt. And they can induce phenomena such as, cold spots, dropping temperatures, and aromas as well.
Yeah.
So, that unusual smell that just wafts past.
Yes.
I mean, it's a theory that intelligent hauntings manifest for a specific reason. They're not just, unlike your residual, they're not just hanging around. They're there for a reason. So they're either tied to or have a connection with the location they're at or a person. They might have unfinished business, fear of moving on, or it's possible they died in a tragic circumstance, and so they just haven't let go. And just like residual hauntings, emotion plays a part in the imprinting and the releasing of the energy. So, it's very, very similar in that regard.
Yeah, there seems to actually, sorry, just want to jump in, but
Yeah.
I think I don't know about you, but in my experience, I think it's pretty safe to say that most hauntings of either in well, primarily an interactive or an intelligent haunting, is definitely tied to emotions.
Absolutely.
You know, there's and that emotion is why they're there, whether that be um, a tragic passing, whether it be they love someone so much back on this plane that they want to hang around, whether it be they love a house and they want to remain in it and it's still their house as far as they're concerned. But yeah,
Yeah. And
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
that's right. Some of them don't even have the consciousness that they're no longer living. They think they're
Exactly.
still living, you know.
Yep.
And so that's something we need to keep in mind when we're dealing with them,
Yep.
because they don't, some of them don't know they're dead. They're still going along doing their thing. Um, and so asking questions of when they died can be a shock to them, because they don't actually realize, they're just not aware. So we need to carefully consider those sorts of approaches and questions, when we are
Absolutely.
researching and doing EVPs and things.
Yep,
Um,
for sure.
so yeah, while we want to interact with them, we need to make sure we're doing it the right way, Yeah,
Respectfully.
absolutely. Um, what else?
What else? Uh,
I
oh,
mean,
the fact that
yeah,
go on.
they seem to retain the same traits. I think I might have already said that, in life, in death as they did in life. So, their personality can shine through even in death. They might have the same behavioral patterns, um, the same, if they were aggressive in life, they might come through like that in death as well.
So what you're
Um,
saying is they could, if they're an asshole in life, they could quite easily be an asshole of a ghost.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us around to one of my favorite topics, poltergeists. So poltergeists are still very much an enigma for the paranormal researcher, although there are new theories that are beginning to emerge regarding this type of phenomena. And the as I'm sure most people do know, but we'll go over it. The word is actually German in origin, with poltern being a German verb meaning to rumble or make sound, and Geist being the German word for spirit or ghost. So the very first known poltergeist case dates back to the first century. So while this phenomena has been with us for quite some time, we are still attempting to definitively discover the origin and the cause of the activity when we talk about poltergeists. It's not common. So people constantly on YouTube saying I've got a poltergeist and showing you their fake content. Poltergeists are not common at all. There are roughly, according to some parapsychological societies, there are normally about 2 or 3 cases worldwide a year. However, they are sufficient enough for parapsychologists to investigate. You will find that most of the poltergeist cases are actually normally identified by the name of the town or the location that the outbreaks occurred in. So, like you talk about the Enfield poltergeist or the South Shields poltergeist. But in some cases, they've been named after the family that have been subjected to the disturbances. So that's where the names normally come from. So normally poltergeist phenomena will begin with very small manifestations that escalate to a stage where the phenomena can be physically threatening, and incredibly frightening to those that are within the household or to those that are experiencing it, before it disappears just as quick as it came. So the problem with poltergeist cases are they are normally very spontaneous, and if they're not gotten onto straight away, it doesn't give the parapsychologist a very long time to actually document and investigate what's going on before the actual phenomena just ceases, like as quickly as it began, literally. So in all reported cases, and I've looked at numerous poltergeist cases, and just about every single one of them start with knocking or rapping, or banging or scratching sounds. That's how it begins. Um, the activity then sort of intensifies to objects and sometimes people. So objects will be physically moved, they'll be levitated, they'll be thrown. And in some cases, they can be quite heavy objects. They can be like big dressing tables, wall units, beds, and that has actually happened on numerous occasions. And several witnesses, have been present at the time and have attested to the fact that a large king size 4-poster bed just slid across the room of its own accord when no one was near it. When the object does move, having no one near it can rule out any sort of fraudulent phenomena, particularly if we're talking about large objects, because there's no way large objects are going to be pulled by a piece of fishing wire, for instance. In several modern cases of poltergeist phenomena, the noises have been captured on recordings, and therefore mass hallucinations of the witnesses have also been ruled out. So interestingly enough, with poltergeist cases, other manifestations can include incendiary phenomena, such as small fires that break out within the house. And case files have shown that in 11%, case file studies have shown that in 11% of poltergeist cases, this occurs. Another thing is water manifesting with the poltergeist phenomena, just like pools of water on the floor spontaneously appearing or seeping from the walls even. That's only been reported in about 5% of cases. Also, oil seeping from the walls is another thing, or cabinets is another thing that has been presented. The other thing that has been spoken about is people being pinched, being bitten, being scratched. And these things are totally inconsistent with it having been self-inflicted. So it's in areas where the individual can't reach, or scratches when the individual doesn't have nails, that sort of thing. However, this normally occurs when the poltergeist phenomena is reaching its terminal point. And the phenomena tends to be really short-lived in this, when it gets to that stage, anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. However, there has been a poltergeist case that has lasted 6 years in Brazil, and one in Brazil that lasted 11 years. But longer durations of this type of phenomena are really, really unusual. Now, the one thing I do want to say about poltergeist cases, and it is now a theory that poltergeists are not an external being. That's actually quite a solid theory, and there is some data to support that. So normally the phenomena is centered on an individual, or it's centered on a place. The majority of the research has been undertaken by parapsychologists, and normally the outbreak of the phenomena needs that individual present for phenomena to occur. So that person is normally referred to as the focus of the or the agent of the phenomena. So there has been cases that show that when the one individual of the property leaves and goes and stays somewhere else for 2 weeks, nothing happens back at that home for 2 weeks, and the phenomena seems to move with the individual. And this can even, and has done, in certain case files, gone to work with the individual. And there is a case of a woman it was back in the 60s in the UK, who lost numerous jobs because of the phenomena that used to occur in her workplace. So there was a study undertaken by Roll in 1977, and that showed that 79% of cases clearly show that there is an agent or a focus involved. That's actually quite a high level. And we're talking about parapsychologists. So,
Yeah.
they're not running around going there saying that there's a haunting. They are actively, really seriously investigating this, and they're not automatically jumping to paranormal causes. And yet, in 79% of cases that have been looked at, seriously looked at, there is an agent involved. So that's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
The same study gleaned that 42% of cases, the phenomena followed the individual beyond the home, as I said earlier, like to work, to school, to hobbies, pleasure pursuits, that sort of stuff. And a secondary study that was done by Cornell and Gould, I think, in 79, concluded that the cases containing agents was only 40%, not 42 or not 79. So whichever study you look at, there's still data to support this theory that there has to be an agent involved for poltergeist phenomena to occur. So if we look at that theory, let's take a look at that theory. If we're going to look at the theory of an agent being present, and parapsychologists have examined 3 biographic factors. And one is the gender, the other one is the age, and the other one is the domestic situation of the agent, or who they believe is the agent. So the ages, there's been 2 studies that have been undertaken, and they show that there is a predominance of female agents. That doesn't mean that there isn't male. I'm just saying that there's a predominance of female agents. And one study sample set was 61%. Another one was 73% to support that the predominance of female agents were involved in poltergeist phenomena. Roll's sample set age ranged from 8 to 78 years old, with the median being 13 years of age. Gould and Cornell's sample set contains 70% aged under the age of 20. So the tendency for the focus or the agent to be of an adolescent age kind of falls into that category. Because when you're hitting 18 and 19, you are still at the tail end of puberty at the end of the day. So there was an interesting trend that came from both of these studies in the sample sets, and that was of the domestic situation of those being studied. When they were studying the domestic situation of those that were 18 years and under, only 62% were living away from home at the time that the disturbances began, and 41% had the disturbances occur when they were either problems in their domestic situation or changes. So they could have been living with relatives, they could have been in a boarding situation, they could have been in a hostel, things like that. 15% were found to be suffering from mental or emotional problems prior to the outbreak of the activity. That is really interesting. So there are 5 different strands of theory to this phenomena, and I'm going to look at some of my notes as I go through it in case I forget. But one is that a ghost or spirit haunts the location or the agent, i.e. the person. But if you look at how the phenomena manifests, you can see how easy it would be to come to that conclusion, right? So it's glaringly similar, if not exactly the same, as ghostly manifestations with knocks, scratching sounds, movements of objects, and stuff like that. The second theory is that it's fraud or trickery. So opportunistic timing, right? people studying how to get away with doing something, that sort of thing. There's been cases where fraud has indeed been proven categorically beyond any shadow of a doubt. So you've got to seriously consider that possibility. And manifestations are rigorously examined when people are investigating this type of phenomena. However, the fraud and the trickery aspect is inadequate as an explanation for all poltergeist phenomena. It can only actually be an explanation for some, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the third theory is that the phenomena has been misinterpreted and they are nothing more than usual events being witnessed by over imaginative or nervous individuals. And Susie, you know how many residentials we've done, and you know what the case is surrounding that.
Yeah.
That is the case in a lot of them, right? So
Absolutely.
things such as seismic activity, rodents being behind skirting boards or in walls, pipes banging underneath the floorboards, shifting house foundations, all those sorts of things, geomagnetic radiation disturbing the temporal lobe of the individuals, and there's plenty of other things that could account for these disturbances that people are experiencing. A lot of these can be eliminated by a decent paranormal researcher by calling in suitably skilled people, i.e., plumbers, electricians, builders, that sort of thing. And they can examine and find out what the cause is. However, again, just like the trickery and the fraud, misinterpretation cannot be attributed to all poltergeist cases, and therefore, once again, it can't be an adequate theory to explain the phenomena in every single instance. That is just, I mean, what they're saying is that it's a possibility for both of those, misinterpretation and trickery or fraud, and they do need to be considered. The fourth theory, and this is one that has gained a lot of widespread support from parapsychologists in recent years, and that is subconscious PK. So, subconscious psychokinesis. Those who support this theory refer to it as recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. So, both the surveys that have been done and the data that have been gathered, and this included psychological assessments, show a high level of tension amongst poltergeist agents. So, again, we're coming in play with the emotion thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
So keep in mind that these studies that have been undertaken show a large leaning towards agents being of an adolescent age, where their frustrations are unable to be articulated in what is deemed as an acceptable manner by society. And therefore, it's interesting to note that a lot of poltergeist phenomena appears to be very childish and very childlike in nature, such as the disturbances of throwing things around and banging and knocking, kind of like a tantrum, in other words. And the final theory is the neurological model theory. So, Roll proposes that recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis activity is due to eruptions in the central nervous system, and concludes that 4% of his sample set feature epileptic disorders. So while it's an interesting theory and it's evidential based, it's not very strong. So we're going to leave that up to other individuals to study that further should they wish to. So, you know what? There could actually be a little bit of truth in each one of those theories. Some poltergeist cases have been found to be misinterpretation. Some poltergeist cases do possess fraudulent activity. It could be possible that other cases are RSPK, recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, excuse me, and that some are in fact a disincarnate entity. At this stage, exploring poltergeist phenomena, nothing can be confirmed, and therefore nothing can be ruled out, literally. But it's a really interesting topic. It's a super, super interesting topic, and I love poltergeist cases. I'm not sure I'd like to be involved in investigating one because they can be quite frightening, but they're also very interesting. But personally, me, and having done my course in parapsychology with Edinburgh University, I actually really lean quite heavily towards the RSPK theory, the recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis theory, from an individual. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an adolescent. You've just got to remember that they've said in their sample sets, there's been a high percentage of them being adolescents. That doesn't mean that they haven't found a 48-year-old male that seems to be an agent. It just means that the majority are female and the majority are in the adolescent phase.
Yeah.
So, Susie, we have spoken about shadow people in depth. We did a whole episode on it, but do you want to just run over, because it really does need a mention when we're talking about haunting classifications. Do you just want to run over that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just briefly, in recent times, shadow people have become a common phenomenon. Reports are on the rise around the world. And this is where witnesses claim to have seen a shadow of a person or a humanoid shape within their home or environment. While it's termed as a shadow, the shadow itself is generally, more often than not, described as a dense black solid apparition. No discernible features, although some reports state the shadow person to have red eyes. There have been a few reported manifestations that have occurred outdoors. Some witnesses have reported a sense of evil or malevolence about them. One of the most commonly seen shadow people is referred to as the Hat Man. The apparition donning the big hat. And in some cases, this is reported as a trilby-styled hat, and in others as a top hat.
Yeah, I noticed that although this Hat Man report is around, he seems to don two different hats, or maybe there's two different types of shadow people that wear hats. I don't know, but
Yeah, what I've seen and what I've read is the ones that seem to see the top hat see a longer, taller figure than the one with the trilby. So, which makes me think maybe it is two different, but but these shadow people don't seem to attempt to initiate any form of communication. They just want to be seen fleetingly or in the peripheral. There have been some cases where shadow people have just stood motionless watching a witness.
Yeah, that's creepy.
That's
really creepy, man.
And there's a lot of theories regarding the phenomenon. So everything from them being ghosts, interdimensional beings, demons, astral bodies, just a figure of the imagination, time travelers, even aliens. However, an accidental finding did emerge from Switzerland while doctors were trying to identify the source of epileptic seizures in young women. And after stimulating her left temporoparietal junction, they found it created the illusion of a shadow person.
Mm.
And although there's no case studies regarding shadow people available, it's bound to happen soon.
Yeah. The thing is that most of these shadow people are fleeting again. It's kind of, and by the time you get somebody in, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be around to be seen. And we don't even know what these things are. I mean, where do they come from? What are they?
Yeah.
We talk about ghosts and we say that, that is the remnants of a person on a biocellular level, if you like. There was someone who were alive and now they're not. And you can't say that that's not the case because people have seen dead people that they know come to them. And other people have seen dead people walk down the street that they know that have turned around and smiled at them and then disappeared. Is it the imagination of the individual? Who knows? Is that the same way with shadow people? Is it the imagination of the individual? Who knows? I mean, we don't even know what they are, do we?
No clue.
Yeah. So let's take another look at something that again, is very close to my heart. And Susie, you will know this from decades and decades ago. And that's elemental beings. And quite close to my heart because my great grandma was supposedly an old witch. I got a chance to meet her before she died. And she was always out working with the fae folk, so the elemental beings. Also, because I've had a lot of interaction with them myself, both here in New Zealand and in England, and they are very, very different. And also because I think a lot of people, if we're going to talk about misidentification, I think a lot of paranormal investigators, and I think an absolute abundance of ghost hunters, confuse elemental beings with the D word, dare we say it, demons, because they are not these lovely little fairy gossamer winged Tinkerbell type of beings. They're not. And they don't have a great love for mankind in any way, shape, or form. In fact, hatred would probably be the better word.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't they? Because look what we do to, the place that they live, Elemental beings are if you listen to occult studies, are said to be older than time itself. Pretty much. They've been here from the dawn of time. And we're just a carbuncle on the arse of their world as far as they're concerned. But they do deserve a mention because, as I say, I do believe that a lot of groups get hauntings where they say that there's a negative. I think that's the terminology, the buzz terminology that's now used.
Yeah.
In my day, it was just a negative energy. Now it's just called a negative. Or there's a demon. So if we're going to talk about elemental beings, we're talking about this huge repertoire of beings. It is so long that you cannot put them all in little boxes. Okay. We'll talk a little bit in a second about Paracelsus and the fantastic Swiss philosopher and how he did. But elemental beings are considered to be nature spirits. And as I said, very, very old. And according to Paracelsus, they're connected to the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. Gnomes being the earth elementals, sylphs being the air elementals, salamanders being the fire elementals, and undines being the water elementals. So they actually make for the 4 cornerstones of magic in the occult sense. So, as I said, they are nature beings and they are as old as the earth itself, but they are still able to haunt locations. And this can be an indoor or an outdoor location. They can haunt people, they can haunt buildings. If you actually go to Ireland, you will find that a lot of houses will have their front and back door open in all weather because they're right in the middle of what they call a ferry walkway.
Yep.
So I remember when I went to Galway and I remember seeing all these saucers of milk outside and I said, my God, this village has a load of cats because every house had a saucer of milk outside. And the tour guide laughed at me and he said, oh, you silly beggar, they're for the fairy folk. They're to appease the fairy folk. And I went, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Never seen that before. But still, over in Europe, some villages still strongly adhere to these practices. And rather than themselves getting haunted, or because they're considered to be quite mischievous beings, and they can be quite petty beings as well, they keep them at bay and they placate them with things like bowls of milk and leaving their front doors and back doors open so their flow isn't impeded through their fairy walkway and so on and so forth. But these are one of the hardest classifications to detect. And as I've previously said, most people confuse their presence with that of a demon or a negative spirit. And that's because the elemental energy is wild and it's raw, and they possess a really high level of distrust of us humans. Their energy can really be frightening, and it can be certainly be intimidating, and that's why quite often they're mistaken for evil when they're just not. They don't have that sense. Elementals have a job to do. They're not like us. They don't think like us. They've got a job to do, and they do their job, and that's all they do. New Age, since the New Age came along, and I use that term all the time, the New Age people have speak about these creatures in very favourable terms. However, ancient folklore surrounding their world and these beings describe them as very, very dangerous, and that they do not subscribe to human perceptions of good and evil at all. So normally, the only person that's going to be able to detect whether or not something is an elemental would, or let me phrase this very carefully. The only person that I would listen to that tells me that an elemental is present, or that something can be attributed to an elemental, would actually be an occult practitioner or a medium who is experienced and has worked with their energies previously, and therefore is able to identify them easily. If you're dealing with any hauntings where an elemental is considered to be present, you need to, what's the word I'm looking for? You need to use, that wasn't the word, but let's use that word. You need to use extreme caution. Extreme caution. So in all honesty, if you think that you have a case with an elemental, that haunting is going to be best passed to a specialist in that area, pretty much, rather than you trying to deal with it on your own. Now, Susie, I know I said I wasn't going to mention this, but let's mention it as a cautionary tale. Do you want to do it?
No, go for your life. I'll let you do it.
Hate even talking about them. Okay, so I guess when we're talking about haunting classifications nowadays, with all the overpopularized American TV paranormal programs attempting to keep their ratings up, we can't go past without mentioning the D word: demons. So it seems every haunting is a demon nowadays, and that's just not the case. Demons are exceptionally rare in paranormal cases, and I mean exceptionally rare. They do not attach themselves to locations, favoring most attachments to people. If they are going to present, they also do not present themselves in the way that is portrayed on these programs or these movies. Their actions are incredibly subtle on their victims, and they worsen over a period of time. And this will be months, if not a couple of years. Okay? They're always said never to work alone. So if there's one, there's more. So you can go back to that saying, we are legion. That is very true. Yeah. But when I say that they're exceptionally rare, guys, I mean it. I really do. I really, really mean this. And they are not portrayed in the way they are in movies. As I said, you wouldn't even attribute a demonic haunting to a demon.
No.
In all honesty, you wouldn't, because what they do is so subtle, and it's not for the masses. It's normally the one individual that they target, and everyone else to everybody else, it might look like they're going through a breakdown, or they're having emotional problems, or they're not sleeping well, or we need to get them a psychiatrist, or whatever the case may be. But, we're not talking about heads swiveling 360 degrees and spitting out pea coloured soup like Linda Blair did. That's just not how they roll. And the chances of any paranormal investigator coming across a case where a demon involved is about 0.000000005%. That's it.
Yeah.
However, should you think that you have, you probably need to go back and learn things from scratch. Or you probably shouldn't be in this field at all if you think that everything's a demon. But if you think that you come across one of those, you need to employ the services of a Christian priest. A demon is a Christian construct, and therefore only a Christian priest can deal with it. And that's all I'm going to say about demons. That's it. I'm done. Not talking any more about it because they get too much airtime as it is.
Way too much.
Way too much. Way too much. Do you want to talk about portals a bit? I mean, we've gone over this too, but they do really do need to be mentioned, I think.
Yeah. I think they need to have a bit of a special mention.
Yeah.
They deserve it. Look, in some locations that they're clearly present and can be responsible for the hauntings that are experienced. Historical literature describes them as being present from the dawn of time. And the theory is that portals are doorways to other dimensions or other worlds, other planes, where the dead are alleged to reside, and they facilitate the passage into our realm or our plane. These other dimensions are considered to be placed right beside, underneath, above, or even in some literature within our own realms. And the portals can occur anywhere and are not just limited to buildings.
Yeah, they can happen outside.
They can have, yeah. And I think most of the ones I've read about and heard about are external. They're outside.
Yeah.
And I think they quite often go, with the fae folk and, the likes of that.
Yep.
Detection's
And
not
possibly even the shadow people.
Yeah, I would say so. Detection's not terribly difficult, and a haunting that presents numerous individuals and different kinds of manifestations can sometimes be an indication of the enigma of a portal being present. It may also be worthy of a mention that with portals present, the ghosts or entities don't remain indefinitely at the location. They seem to come and go as they please, with the portal being the entry and departing point. Those that have stumbled upon or believe they've witnessed a portal describe them in usually one of two ways. Outdoors, they're noted as being shimmering, a patch in the environment like heat coming off a road in the summer, or, off the water, sort of like an oasis. Others have described a blinding flash of light which disappears and a being's left in its place. So witnesses that have ventured too close have described feeling vertigo, a buzzing in their ears, extreme dizziness, nausea, headaches. And like I was just saying, mention of portals have been found in folklore and historical literature as well, within occult writings. And the enigma's been popularized by various TV reality shows like Ghost Adventures, Portals to Hell.
Because if they haven't got a demon, they've got a portal, and if they don't got a portal, they've got a demon.
Yeah. So their existence is very much a point of conjecture. But yeah, they're worthy of a mention when we discuss hauntings.
Yeah, absolutely, because they can facilitate the passageway, can't they? So
Absolutely.
I think they're definitely worthy of a mention in that respect. I think really that the hardest job of a paranormal investigator is not to even get responses or elicit responses. I think the hardest job is probably to ascertain what you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
I mean, when you think about it, an intelligent haunting is fairly easy to ascertain because you're going to get audible.
Responses. You're going to get
You get
communication.
yeah, voices. You're going to get audible voices, whether you hear them in real time or whether you find them on your EVP later. Residuals are easy enough to ascertain. Because you're going to get no interaction if like it might even walk straight through you and you like you're not even there.
And it repeats. It tends to repeat. So, because it's the same
Exactly.
every night, sort of,
I mean, there's been cases in England with castles where they see someone walk down a hall and then kind of disappear into the floor. And then when they've done excavations, they're like, my God, there's a staircase down here. So that's why that being walks down there. So they're following a path that they did when they were alive. But interacting with you is not going to happen because they're not, in essence, they're not an independent energy. They're just something that loops around every so often when the weather conditions are correct. It's like a switch. It could be a time of year on the anniversary of a death. It could be when there's a thunderstorm or when there's solar flares or whatever. But it's like a switch flicks, and then they do their thing. Walk down the hall, turn right, disappear through a wall when there used to be a door there, that sort of thing. So I think those two are pretty easy to ascertain. I think it's all the rest of them that are a little bit more difficult. And then when you've ascertained what you've got, then you want to know why they're there, right? And even with an intelligent haunting, it's really difficult to get that sort of information out.
Absolutely.
Like just thinking of the investigation we just did, we're sitting in a hospital. I'm asking, are you Dr. Patterson? Or are you a nurse that was here? Did you know Dr. Patterson? Or were you one of the Polish children that came here? The Polish refugee children that came here? And did you get sick and were you in this hospital? Are you a patient? Are you someone visiting? I mean, the list of freaking questions are endless. But if you don't get responses saying yes or no or Sister Susie or whatever, then you don't know who you're dealing with.
You have no idea.
And that's just a big, massive question mark over the whole haunting that, okay, you've ascertained there is something going on, but who is it? What are you dealing with?
And why?
And why you and why you and once you found out what you're dealing with, why are you dealing with this? Why is this person still here? What do they want? Are they trapped? Are they lost? Do they not know they're dead? Or do they just like it here? And when you're not getting any answers back, it's really hard to come to those conclusions. And decide upon it, because if you've got if you're talking about you've got a place and the people are really scared that it's happening and they just want it gone, that's not part of a paranormal investigations team's job. That's when hopefully you can get your hands on a really decent medium that can help and converse with them and gently get them to move over. But you are not going to get a ghost to go if the ghosts don't want to go. You are not going to get them to go. You can try everything you want. You can try banishments and you can try all sorts of things. But if they're adamant that they're going to stay there, I guess who are we to say no?
Yeah.
But
like that house that we were talking about over the weekend.
What house? I can't remember.
The one in Hamilton that I used to.
Oh yes, yeah.
That was not going anywhere.
They're not going to go if they don't want to go. It's as simple as that. All right, so I think we pretty much nailed the basics. I mean, we could go down other rabbit holes, but then we'd probably be here all nights. So I think we're probably best to leave it there. And It's been an hour, so that's pretty good timing as well. Now, I don't know what we're doing next week, actually. I am not sure, but we will be doing something. Let me just have a look at the spreadsheet and see what is supposedly scheduled, because I'm not 100% sure. Okay, what month are we? God, I tell you what, I'm losing the months now.
It's August next month. It's August this weekend.
August. Oh my God. Okay, right. Now I'm looking at it, and we are looking at Tasha's got a haunted location spotlight
Ooh.
next week. So that should be good. Now, where it's going to be is anyone's guess. I don't even know where it's going to be at this stage, or what case she's going to be looking at, what location she's going to be looking at. So tune in next Friday. Is it a live? No, it's not. Next Friday, it'll be a pre-record, so we'll drop the video at 8 o'clock. So tune in then, and until then, you'll see Susie back. She'll be back. And Barbara and Natasha will be back. They're unable to jump on this week. So they'll be back as well. And we will see you next Friday, 8 o'clock. Until then, have a good week.
Catch you later, everyone.